Hi there, and welcome to already the third episode of my Devlog series. In this episode, I'm going to introduce quite a few things, and we're going to start with dungeon generation. A lot of the work for dungeon generation was already done for a previous project of mine, but from the start I had Prophecy Island in mind, so it was actually pretty easy to get the code over into my current project. In the background, you can see some footage of that previous project now. It never really got into a full game, although it got pretty close looking back at it. I did, of course, had to make a lot of adjustments in order to get this to fit Prophecy Island more. As you could see in the previous footage, it was more of a flat area where the player was dashing through. Now we need actual dungeons to spelunk through. So I had to work on verticality, being able to go up in floors, but also make more side paths for hidden content. In the background right now, you can see a few of these dungeons being generated. So as I mentioned, some effort went into making a very distinct main route through the dungeon and having some side routes. Like I said, this will allow for more side content through dungeons, but also have a more direct line to the finish line. Right now in the background, you can see what that would look like, a main path and its side paths. Introducing staircases is of course vital when you want to work with verticality. It was quite the challenge to get these in, but the basic implementation is in now. This was already part of the algorithm when I took it from the old project, but maybe good to highlight is that when rooms spawn next to each other, they kind of merge their walls. So for example, if you have two walls from both sides, they are not needed and will be removed. This will generate more dynamic rooms. Something I don't have yet, but I really want to introduce later is kind of previews from one section to the other. As you can see in the background right now, this is kind of an example what I mean. If you're on one floor, you'll get a look at the other floor without actually being able to reach it yet. Still need to figure out how I detect which walls to delete for this and to add railings, but that will be really cool to have. Something else the algorithm did already support but still needed asset adjustments for is the different style support. So we now have 3 different dungeon styles with prepared assets for it. The system can of course support more styles, but this is what we have for now. Other than introducing dungeons to Prophecy Island, I've of course also worked on some other things, combat improvements being one of them. I keep working on combat, it's far from done. So I introduced some extra feedback elements. We now have blood splatters when you hit an enemy or when an enemy hits you. Also introduced more feedback when you actually make the attack and get hit, so the characters actually move with the attack now, forward and backward. Not too much yet, so I do want to improve that more later. And next to that, I also added death animations. I've also done some work on more enemies. I'm introducing new enemy types. Every enemy in the game beforehand were humanoids. Now I'm experimenting with more creature-like enemies. I have to confess that these two are kind of the main reason I finally started implementing death animations, because beforehand death animations were just activate the ragdolls, and I really could not be bothered to implement the ragdolls for these two yet. They currently both only have 2 basic attacks, but I'm starting to experiment with more fancy attacks, like puking out a bug that's gonna attack you, or more AoE attacks. So yeah, that will come later. The biggest new introduction to the enemy system is of course the first boss fight prototype. I'm using a troll boss here with some fancy animations for its attacks. And I've introduced the first new attack method, which is the gap jump. So when you're far enough away, he'll jump towards you and do some area of effect damage around the player. Yeah, still needs improvement of course, but I'm really happy with the first setup here. And this will allow me to create more dynamic boss fight and more unique fights for every enemy I'm going to introduce. And here you can see a nice display of one of the death animations for me, the player. So that's it in a nutshell, what I've been doing in the last few weeks. What's next is probably going to be quests. I'm actually looking into it already now. I already had a quest system, but I wasn't really happy with it, so I've kind of revised it. Working on the new implementation now. Kind of needed the dungeons for that, so one of the reasons I waited for that. It's going to be really cool how quests are going to be tying everything I've worked on together. So yeah, I'm really eager to work on it and to show it off to you. One last thing, I've updated my Ko-Fi page. I'm starting to experiment with Discord server, so I've added that as a something you can subscribe for. I'm gonna make it more public later, but for now, everybody who subscribes to my Ko-Fi page gets access to it. I'm also gonna include Ko-Fi subscribers to my end credits, so yeah, if you're interested in supporting the project, now's the time. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.